What is up, everybody? We're in day 141 of our Bible in a Year series. Um, Hopefully, we're done having technical issues. Got a new mic in the mail and done a couple tests, and it seems to be doing okay. So, hopefully, no more technical issues. But we're moving back into the book of Esther, or moving into, not back into, the book of Esther. Um, Kind of underrated book, I think. Like I mean, the last couple we've had, but I believe is a slightly underrated book because it's just it's not really talked about a whole lot. Um, so kind of a real quick summary before we jump in. Esther is very dark, I guess you could say. Um, God's name is completely absent from the book, right? You don't see God's name mentioned, but despite that, you still see God's hand moving in the situation, and it's a really good book for encouragement, seeing how God can move in situations where it seems like He's not even present, how He can still be orchestrating things on our behalf in the background when we don't see it. So, really, really good book, and we will jump right into it. Chapter 1. These events took place during the days of Ahasuerus, who ruled 127 provinces from India to Kush. In those days, King Ahasuerus reigned from his royal throne in the fortress at Susa. He held a feast in the third year of his reign for all his officials and staff. The army of Persia and Media, the nobles and the officials from the provinces, he displayed the glorious wealth of his kingdom and the magnificent splendor of his greatness for a total of 180 days. At the end of this time, the king held a week-long banquet in the garden courtyard of the royal palace for all the people, from the greatest to the least, who were present in the fortress of Susa. White and blue linen hangings were fastened with fine white and purple linen cords to silver rods on marble columns. Gold and silver couches were arranged on a mosaic pavement of red feldspar marble, mother of pearl, and precious stones. Drinks were served in an array of gold goblets, each with a different design. Royal wine flowed freely according to the king's bounty. The drinking was according to royal decree. There are no restrictions. The king had ordered every wine steward in his household to serve whatever each person wanted. Queen Vashti also gave a feast for the women of King Ahasuerus' palace on the seventh day. When the king was feeling good from the wine, Ahasuerus commanded Mehuman, Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcass, the 7 eunuchs who personally served him, to bring Queen Vashti before him with her royal crown. He wanted to show off her beauty to the people and the officials because she was very beautiful. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command. That was delivered by his eunuchs. The king became furious, and his anger burned within him. The king consulted the wise men who understood the times, for it was his normal procedure to confer with experts in law and justice. The most trusted ones were Karshina, Shithar, Admatha, Tarshish, Maris, Marcina, and Mimukin. They were the 7 officials of Persia and Media, who had personal access to the king and occupied the highest positions in the kingdom. The king asked, according to the law, what should be done with Queen Vashti, since she refused to obey King Ahasuerus' command that was delivered by the eunuchs. Memucan said in the presence of the king and his officials, Queen Vashti has wronged not only the king, but all the officials and the peoples who are in every one of King Ahasuerus' provinces. For the queen's actions will become public knowledge to all the women, and cause them to despise their husbands, and say, King, ah- King Ahasuerus ordered Queen Vashti brought before him, but she did not come. Before this day is over, the noble women of Persia and Media who hear about the queen's act will say the same thing to all the king's officials, resulting in more contempt and fury. If it meets king's approval, he should personally issue a royal decree. Let it be recorded in the laws of the Persians and the Medes, so that it cannot be revoked. Vashti is not to enter King Ahasuerus' presence, and her royal position is to be given to another woman who is more worthy than she. The decree the king issues will be heard throughout his vast kingdom, so all women will honor their husbands from the greatest to the least. The king and his counselors approved the proposal, and he followed Memucan's advice. He sent letters to all royal provinces, to each province in its own script, and to each ethnic group in its own language, that every man should be master of his own house and speak in the language of his own people. Okay, interesting start. It's weird, especially seeing kind of what's coming up, seeing how the stage was set for this. It's interesting. Chapter 2. Sometime later, when King Ahasuerus' rage had cooled down, he remembered Vashti, what she had done, and what was decided against her. The king's personal attendants suggested, "Let a search be made for beautiful young virgins for the king. Let the king appoint commissioners in each province in his kingdom, so that they may gather all the beautiful young virgins in the harem at the fortress of Susa. Put them under the supervision of Higai, the king's eunuch, keeper of the women, and give them the required beauty treatments. Then the young woman who pleases the king will become queen instead of Vashti." This suggestion pleased the king, and he did accordingly. In the fortress of Susa there was a Jewish man named Mordecai, son of Jair, son of Shimi, son of Kish, a Benjamite. Kish had been taken into exile from Jerusalem with the other captives when King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon took King Jeconiah of Judah into exile. Mordecai was the legal guardian of his cousin, Hadassah, that is, Esther, because she had no father or mother. The young woman had a beautiful figure and was extremely good looking. When her father and mother died, Mordecai had adopted her as his own daughter. When the king's command and edict became public knowledge, and when many young women were gathered at the fortress of Susa under Higai's supervision, Esther was taken to the palace into the supervision of Higai, keeper of the woman. The young woman pleased him and gained his favor, so that he accelerated the process of the beauty treatments and the special diet that she received. He assigned 7 hand-picked female servants to her from the palace, and transferred her and her servants to the harem's best quarters. Esther did not reveal her ethnicity or her family background, because Mordecai had ordered her not to make them known. Every day, Mordecai took a walk in front of the harem's courtyard to learn how Esther was doing and to see what was happening to her. During the year before each young woman's turn to go to King Ahasuerus, the harem regulation required her to receive beauty treatments with oil of myrrh for 6 months, and then with perfumes and cosmetics for another 6 months. When the young woman would go to the king, she was given whatever she requested to take with her from the harem to the palace. She would go in the evening, and in the morning she would return to a second harem under the supervision of the king's eunuch Shazgaz, keeper of the concubines. She never went to the king again unless he desired her and summoned her by name. Esther was the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had adopted her as his own daughter. When her turn came to go to the king, she did not ask for anything except what Haggai, the king's eunuch, keeper of the woman, suggested. Esther gained favor in the eyes of everyone who saw her. She was taken to King Ahasuerus in the palace in the 10th month, the month in the 10th month, the month Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. The king loved Esther more than all the other women. She won more favor and approval from him than did any of the other virgins. He placed the royal crown on her head and made her queen in place of Vashti. The king held a great banquet for all his officials and staff. It was Esther's banquet. He freed his provinces from tax payments and gave gifts worthy of the king's bounty. When the virgins were gathered a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's table. Esther still did not reveal her family background or her ethnicity. As Mordecai had directed, she obeyed Mordecai's orders as she always had while he raised her. During those days when Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who guarded the entrance, became infuriated and planned to assassinate King Ahasuerus. When Mordecai learned of the plot, he reported it to Queen Esther, and she told the king on Mordecai's behalf. When the report was investigated and verified, both men were hanged on the gallows. This event was recorded in the historical record in the king's presence. Chapter 3. After all this took place, King Ahasuerus honored Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite. He promoted him in rank and gave him a higher position than all the other officials. The entire royal staff at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, because the king had commanded this to be done for him. But Mordecai would not bow down or pay homage. The members of the royal staff at the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why are you disobeying the king's command?" When they had warned him day after day, and he still would not listen to them, they told Haman in order to see if Mordecai's actions would be tolerated, since he had told them he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai was not bowing down or paying him homage, he was filled with rage. When he learned of Mordecai's ethnic identity, it seemed repugnant to Haman to do away with Mordecai alone. He planned to destroy all of Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout Ahasuerus' kingdom. In the first month, the month of Nisan, in King Ahasuerus' 12th year, the pur, that is, the lot, was cast before Haman for each day in each month, and it fell on the 12th month, the month Adar. Then Haman informed King Ahasuerus, "There is one ethnic group scattered throughout the peoples in every province in your kingdom, keeping themselves separate. Their laws are different from everyone else's, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not the king's best interest to tolerate them. If the king approves, let an order be drawn up authorizing their destruction, and I will pay 375 tons of silver to the officials for deposit in the royal treasury." The king removed his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. Then the king told Haman, "The money and people are given to you to do with as you see fit." The royal scribes were summoned on the 13th day of the first month, and the order was written exactly as Haman commanded. It was intended for the royal satraps, the governors of each of the provinces, and the officials of each ethnic group, and written for each province in its own script and to each ethnic group in its own language. It was written in the name of King Ahasuerus and sealed with the royal signet ring. Letters were sent by couriers to each of the royal provinces telling the officials to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jewish people, young and old, women and children, and plunder their possessions on a single day, the 13th day of Adar, the 12th month. A copy of the text issued as law throughout every province was distributed to all the peoples so that they might get ready for that day. The couriers left, spurred on by royal command, and the law was issued in the fortress of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to drink while the city of Susa was in confusion. And that is it for today's reading. Again, it's interesting kind of seeing the stage set here. If you've not read ahead or you haven't read before, you're not sure what's going on. It's obviously, you read ahead if you want to, but it is seeing all the details, like reading through and then going back and reading through, knowing how the story ends, seeing all the little details that kind of work together to get Esther into the position that she needs to be in, and for the things that need to happen. It's awesome. It's awesome. Okay, question 1. Vashti's refusal in chapter 1 disrupts the king's prideful display. How does this act challenge us to consider the tension between human authority and standing for dignity in the face of unjust demands? So, I think it's interesting. One of the things I find interesting with this is the idea that it ultimately is the king's pride that God uses to set up Esther to save the Jewish people. Like, God uses this thing that is not good to come around and save his chosen people. It's great. Now, as far as the specific question goes, how does this consider the tension between human authority and standing for dignity in the face of unjust demands? I think that can be difficult. Obviously, I think there is a time and a place. Now, there's some things that you should never back down on, but I do think that there could be a time and place for some things where you do back down. I know there was I heard a story from a missionary. I believe he was a missionary in India. I might be wrong. It might be in Nepal, or it may have vice versa. But he was a missionary somewhere in either India or Nepal. And there were many people there that were very violent towards him, being a Christian and being an outsider. And one time, I remember he was telling a story that he was riding a bike or something like that, and someone threw something out in front of him and caused him to wreck. And he got up expecting a fight. They were coming at him, and he picked up like a tire iron and like ready to fight, to defend himself, mind you, not to start a fight, but to defend himself from violence other people were trying to enact against him. And the he said he felt like God tell him in that moment, I didn't send you halfway around the world to attack people or to fight people. And he said he knew he had to just drop it and take what was coming. Now, that's not always the case, and I will say, I think too that that's a much easier decision to make if it's just you that is being harmed. But that would be something that we see as unjust. Just when you have the ability to defend yourself, not doing so, allowing them to harm you. Yeah. Question 2. Esther's rise to queen in chapter 2, orchestrated by unseen providence. How might her story prompt us to reflect on God's quiet work in seemingly secular circumstances to advance his purposes for his people? Again, there's a lot of this that you may not see just yet. Some of it will kind of start to make sense as we get in. We've only got today, tomorrow, and then one other day, I think, for Esther, and it's done. It's a really small book. But you can see God, like I said, even God using the king's pride to set up Esther to be in a position to save the Israelite people. That's God's hand moving throughout the situation, despite the mention of God not being there. Question 3. Haman's genocidal plot in chapter 3 threatens the Jews. How does this crisis invite us to wrestle with the reality of evil's opposition to God's covenant people and the hope of his deliverance through unexpected means? We see this frequently, actually. Threat against God's chosen people. Now, this can be Israel. This can also be people in the New Testament. We see, like with Paul, there's a couple instances. But, excuse me, there are, we've talked before about how God frequently likes to use people and means that cannot accomplish on their own. Likewise, I think he likes to use unexpected means to save people, because then again, there's nothing that can be done. Like, no one can take glory for themselves. The glory has to go to God, because there's no way that this could happen without it being a God thing. I think we can also take in that, knowing that even in situations where things seem rough or bad or whatever, it we can trust God, trust his timing, trust his plan, trust that he is sovereign in all things, and that he has best in mind for us. So that is it for today. Appreciate everyone watching and listening up to this point. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I enjoy reading and interacting with comments as much as I can in the comments on the videos. If this has been a blessing to you, consider sharing it with other people. Word of mouth is the best way the podcast spreads, so you could share this and it could be a blessing to them as well. It could help them stick with a daily Bible reading plan. That's the whole purpose of this series. You don't want to go anywhere. Tomorrow we are going to be back in Esther, chapters 4, 5, and 6. It gets good. It gets really good. Really awesome to see God working his hand through this whole situation. It's good stuff. So you don't want to miss it. Thanks. God bless.